So coming back to Osho, have you tried any of his meditations?
No, I haven't. Although I have heard great praise of the meditations from Osho's devotees, all followers. The thing is that Osho spoke about 112 meditations, for example, which are mentioned in an ancient Hindu treatise, Vigyan Bhairav Tantra. So there are 112 techniques of meditation mentioned, and Osho speaks about them. But on the one hand, he speaks about all these, different meditations, but he doesn't give one technique which is so outstanding, which can cover everybody. So he didn't have a great meditation technique that he left behind. There's a kind of inconsistency.
What inconsistency?
Yeah, because if you listen to Osho's talks, he keeps saying, my talks are not important. What I'm saying is not important. What is really important is meditation. Do your meditation. But you have thousands of people, or even hundreds of thousands of people, who will listen to Osho. They are hooked on to his discourses. They will listen to him every day. But none of them, or very few of them, will be practicing meditation. So that's a kind of great inconsistency that Osho himself says, my discourses are not important. What is important is meditation. But his followers, they are listening to him, but they are not doing meditation, because he hasn't left behind any great meditation centers. So if you Google, you'll find the Osho Foundation is there in Pune and in other places, but there's no comparison between TM, which has so many hundreds of centers, or between Vipassana, which has also hundreds, if not thousands of centers. So you don't have so many Osho meditation centers. So that's a kind of a contradiction.
On the other hand, Osho gave people options. So, one meditation technique might not work for everybody. So he gave people options to try different techniques, right?
That is absolutely correct, Ananya. I mean, TM may not work for everybody. Many people say TM is useless. It's true that it works for David Lynch. It works for a few other people, or maybe many other people, but it's not working for everybody. So Osho, in a way, is a kind of homeopathic solution. He's giving 112 techniques which are there in the ancient scriptures. He's also created some techniques of his own. But the thing is that none of these techniques have really taken off. Yeah, I remember with regard to TM, actually TM is mocked in one of Woody Allen's films. There's a Hollywood actor who's calling somebody on the phone in great anxiety, and he says, I've forgotten my mantra. So it's, a kind of, he's in panic because he's forgotten the mantra. With the TM has the mantra. Or there's somebody going into a hall and saying, oh, the Maharishi has come, and I want to touch the hem of his garment. And Woody Allen says, well, the garment must be worth millions then if you, so desperate to touch his hem. So these critiques are there.
Okay, but you gave Osho a score of 70 out of 100. So I'm pretty sure there are some flaws that you see too. What are those?
There are a few negatives that I see about Osho, despite his great erudition and brilliance, his out-of-box thinking. One of the things which I feel is that Osho, he was very much against conventional morality. He was very much against putting people in uniform. He wanted people to express their individuality. But as far as his own disciples are concerned, he wanted them all to wear pre-approved shades of orange. So as far as I think, when I listen to Osho's discourses, I think that even if a man comes wearing a skirt which is multicolored, Osho should accept him as somebody who wants to be a disciple or to be a follower. So why did Osho insist that all his disciples, they should wear orange robes, and they should be also pre-approved orange robes? That's a bit of a contradiction. The second thing is that Osho says that his followers, the people who follow him, are among the happiest people on the planet. This was not my personal experience, because many years ago I went to Pune to try and listen to Osho. So I went to the ashram. I finally could not meet Osho, unfortunately, but I saw many of the disciples. They looked disconnected. They didn't look particularly happy. And on a second occasion also I went. So I think this was just PR on the part of Osho, that my people are among the happiest in the planet. That is not true.
Is it possible that all this meditation business is fake? Something like emperor's new clothes?
I don't think so. There's much validation even from the scientific community. Time magazine created a big article. They had a big article where they covered meditation, and they interviewed hundreds of doctors who said, yes, it works. It lowers your blood pressure. It's good for your health. And there's a great demand for it. There are, as I mentioned, hundreds of TM centers across the world. There are hundreds and hundreds of Vipassana meditation centers also, and I think more than 90 countries. So there's a great demand for meditation, and is there in all our ancient religions. So to say that it's fake, I don't think that's the case. I think it's a great, great contribution. Of course, I'll agree that there is fakery practiced in the name of meditation.
Why do you think there is so much of demand for meditation? Because people are ready to spend hundreds of pounds altogether to learn meditation.
Of course, one shouldn't generalize, but we are living in a time and age of high stress. So the stress is so much that people are willing to pay hundreds of pounds to go and learn some TM. Vipassana doesn't charge money, but people sometimes have to catch a flight or travel to a Vipassana center, and there are other associated expenses. So people will go. There are hundreds of centers in more than 90 countries, and they want to learn meditation. It's a way of managing your stress.
Since we started talking about Mahesh Yogi first, all his contributions and brilliance apart, do you think there are some negatives about him as well?
Yeah, I think Mahesh Yogi, firstly, one of the limitations was that he didn't have a great physical personality. I mean, he looked like a cat, a very attractive cat, but he was small-sized. In that sense, his two disciples, they have better physical personalities. Of course, Siri Siri wears these robes and he has this long flowing hair, and Deepak Chopra also has a powerful business suit kind of personality. But that's a small thing, I think, although it affects people. The other thing is that Mahesh Yogi's group, they had some really fantastic and impractical ideas. So their idea of creating world peace, for example, was that all the people, 1,000 people, should sit together and meditate collectively. And they actually genuinely believe that if 1,000 people practice TM sitting together, they are going to generate such vibrations that there's going to be peace on the planet. So I think meditation is a great thing for a person individually. But I believe it's ridiculous to think that 1,000 people or even 10,000 people meditating, that is going to stop the wars in Iraq, in the Middle East, stop the Taliban from creating bomb blasts in Afghanistan. For me, that's all nonsense. So those were some impractical, unfounded ideas. You can say is part of the limitations of the Mahesh Yogi guru business.
What about Sri Sri Ravi Shankar? He is also a world-renowned guru. What are his contributions?
Well, Siri Siri, in some sense, he fell in line with his guru. So he created this basic art of living course, and then there was the advanced art of living course. As I mentioned, you were made to sign a declaration that you can't transmit this knowledge. So the basic art and living course which I attended, I hope I'm not going to get sued for this because I'm not supposed to share. But anyhow, it was good. But it culminated in a yoga exercise known as the Sudarshan Kriya. The yoga exercise itself was very good. But sometimes people confuse yoga with deep spirituality. I think yoga is a way to become silent. But yoga itself is not true spirituality. It is just the outer dimension of spirituality that you get composed,
Did you ever have a chance to meet Sri Sri?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. He came to a house in Sector 37 where I live, in some army officer's house, and I went with an army colonel. We said, let's go and see what he has to offer. We were very curious. So we went to meet him, and we went in. It was on the second floor. I could hear the disciples quarreling between themselves. There was some North Indian lobby, some South Indian lobby. The disciples were, quarreling. And then Siri Siri was sitting somewhere. He looked very tired. He'd come from a long journey. And he was holding a flower in his hand with a long stem. As people came and they touched his feet, he would, hit people with the flower. So it was interesting, but it was nothing very much. Not that I'm saying that much have been expected from that. I have to say also that the army colonel with whom I went, he was a bit disappointed because Sri Sri has a kind of feminine presence. So as an army officer, he wants some guru who is a little more, solid. But Sri Sri is very popular among the women. And part of the reason I think he's popular is because he has this softer, gentle vibe which he gives out. So even among the disciples who were gathered, there were 70% I think were women. Not to say that he doesn't have anything of great value to offer. I'm sure he's contributing a lot. Yes, I did meet Sri Sri.
So how would you compare the discourses of Osho and Sadhguru?
Ananya, both have great wisdom. This is something common in Sadhguru and Osho. I would say in some ways Sadhguru has a greater practical intelligence. Osho sometimes he didn't realize the practical implications of things he was saying. He loved to shock and provoke. So, but at the same time, Osho could speak on a variety of topics. His range was incredible. Osho, when he spoke on Christianity, there were Christian priests who said, "We haven't heard anybody speak of the Bible so profoundly." And this man is not even, somebody who's been raised in the Christian tradition. You have Khushwant Singh. Khushwant Singh thought of himself as an authority on Sikhism. He said, "My name is the prominent name that is mentioned in the Encyclopedia Britannica for anything referred to in Sikhism. If there are 30 entries, 25 refer to me." So he says, "I thought I know more about Sikhism than anybody else." But he went to attend a discourse given by Osho on Japji, and he was awestruck. He said, "Oh my God, the way Osho interpreted this sacred Sikh text, it never occurred to me to interpret it like that." So that way the range of the man was incredible. But Sadhguru has a response when you ask him about Osho.
That's interesting. What did he say?
He said Osho is the master of controversy. So I think he said it lovingly but also playfully and a bit critically.
Sadhguru calls Osho the master of controversies. Do you think he's right?
I think he's right. Osho quoted controversy even when he didn't need to. He just loved to shock and provoke. But on the other hand, it could be said that sometimes Sadhguru needs to quote controversy, but he doesn't.
You say Osho quoted controversies needlessly sometimes. Can you give us an example of the same?
Well, I'll give you two examples, and also I will reference here why I say that Sadhguru sometimes has greater practical intelligence. During the course of one interview, Osho was asked as to why there are no poor people who are coming there, and why his presentation style was not that of somebody who's just living very simply. And he said, "My religion is not for the poor. The poor just have to worry about dal roti. My religion is for the rich." Now when he said that, Osho loved to shock and provoke. So he'd love to say something controversial. But he alienated a lot of people. In fact, what he was saying was not true, because most of his disciples, the Western disciples, they were not particularly rich. They were from lower middle class or middle class families. Yes, relative to Indians, they were rich because they were getting their salaries in pounds or euros or dollars. So it wasn't really even true. But he just wanted to shock. And then when he was in Oregon, he had these 26 Rolls Royces. And so people asked him, why do you need 26 Rolls Royces? And he said, "Well, I want to shock people because this is good publicity, because they'll be drawn to me. They will hate me in the beginning, and then they will start loving me when they realize what I have to teach." But I think he didn't realize, practically speaking, that he could alienate so many people, that these would be things that would go against him. And sometimes I meet people today who are very critical of Osho, and two of the things that are there in their mind are, "I am the rich man's guru. The poor, they have nothing to do with spirituality." And the second is this Rolls Royce example. So I think this is needless controversy. Osho was a very wise man, and he said many profound things, but I would say that Osho also said some foolish things at times.
Osho and foolish. What foolish things did he say?
Well, that's why I said at the beginning of our discussion today that don't expect that the Guru will have answers to all your questions. This is what people tend to do. They just have blind faith. Keep your critical mindset on. Even the Guru can make mistakes. For example, Osho said that 1/3 of the world's population is going to die of AIDS. In one discourse, he says that never make predictions, which was a very wise statement because nobody knows what the future is going to throw up. But then he contradicted himself and he made this prediction that 1/3 of the world's population is going to die of AIDS, which never happened. Then he said anybody who is suffering from AIDS should be segregated. This was also against all WHO guidelines, conventional medical opinion, which said that this is just going to drive the disease underground. It doesn't help to segregate people. It's also very violative of people's human rights to segregate them. Now, you might be a very wise person, but these are, things which people study, they do research, you need to defer to medical opinion. So Osho's suggestion that people should be segregated if they are HIV, it was not a very helpful suggestion. Then Osho, despite his great wisdom and out-of-the-box thinking, he was very much against what he considered to be sexual deviance. So he was against homosexuality, he was against lesbianism. And he felt that he was a very tolerant man, but somehow his tolerance didn't extend to the fact that different people could have different sexual orientations, and this has existed in our planet for thousands of years. So these were a few of the things. There's one more thing I should mention, and that is Osho was against the family. So he mentioned that there should be a commune. But the commune which he founded, the children later on, they were interviewed on some channels and they said it was a terrible thing for them. They were not connected to their parents. So these are some of the criticisms.